You ever look at someone, I mean really look at them, and realize you've created an entire fiction about who they are, just because of the uniform they wear? That was the fatal flaw of Elena Vance, the CEO of Orion Tech. To her, people were data points on a spreadsheet, assets or liabilities, red ink or black ink. She ran her company like she ran her life, cold, efficient, and completely detached. She had to be. When she was 12, her father walked out the door for a pack of cigarettes and never came back, leaving her mother to dissolve into a puddle of grief and unpaid bills. So Elena made a vow she would never rely on anyone. She would never let emotions cloud her judgment, and she would control every single variable in her orbit. But there was one variable she didn't account for. A guy named Caleb Miller. For 3 years, Caleb was a ghost in the machine of Orion Tech. He was the night shift maintenance lead. The guy who changed the fluorescent bulbs before they flickered. The guy who unjammed the copy machines. The guy who wiped the coffee rings off the mahogany conference table at 2 a.m. so it would gleam for the board meeting at 9 a.m. Elena saw him, sure. She saw a pair of gray coveralls. She saw a man who kept his head down. She saw a labor cost. What she didn't see was the former MIT engineering prodigy who had deliberately stepped off the career ladder after his wife died in a car wreck, leaving him alone with a 4-year-old daughter. Lily. Caleb took the maintenance job not because he wasn't brilliant, but because he needed a job where he could leave his brain at the door, punch out at 6 a.m., and be there to make pancakes when Lily woke up. He needed the health insurance, and he needed the silence, but genius has a bad habit of leaking out. Over those 3 years, Caleb didn't just clean the building. He secretly patched the servers when they overheated. He rewrote sloppy code in the elevator algorithm so they ran 20% faster. He fixed the Avageek system with spare parts and a soldering iron when the contractor said it would cost $1 million to replace. And every time he did it, he left no trace. Well, almost no trace. The trouble started on a Tuesday. A rainy, miserable Chicago Tuesday. Elena was at the Aviary, one of those restaurants where the appetizers cost more than my first car, trying to close a massive merger deal with a Japanese tech giant. She was stressed, her armor was up, and she was scanning the room like a predator looking for threats. And then she froze. Sitting at a corner table, bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, was Caleb. But it wasn't the Caleb she knew. The gray coveralls were gone. He was wearing a charcoal navy suit that fit him like it was cut by a divine tailor, bespoke, expensive, powerful. He was clean-shaven, his hair was styled, and he looked commanding. And he wasn't alone. Sitting across from him, holding his hand, was a woman who radiated danger and elegance. She had sharp features, a killer bob cut, and eyes that looked like they could laser through steel. This was Veronica Sharp. Elena didn't know her name yet, but she knew the type. High-powered, lethal, expensive. Elena watched, stunned, as Caleb smiled at this woman. It wasn't the polite, deferential nod he gave in the office hallways. It was a warm, crinkling eye smile that transformed his entire face. He looked happy. He looked respected. He looked like an equal. And for the first time in her life, Elena felt a spike of something hot and ugly twist in her gut. It was jealousy. Not romantic jealousy, she barely knew the guy, but power jealousy. How dare he? How dare the man who plunges her toilet sit in her world, wearing that suit, looking at a woman like that? It felt like a betrayal. It felt like he had been mocking her simply by existing as something more than she allowed him to be. The next morning, the atmosphere at Orion Tech was toxic. Elena marched into her office. The image of Caleb in that suit burned into her retinas. She called in Marcus Thorne, her chief strategy officer. Now you have to understand Marcus. He was the kind of guy who would steal the coins off a dead man's eyes. He was slick, ambitious, and he had been feeding Elena's paranoia for years to cover up his own incompetence. Marcus, Elena said, staring out the window at the gray skyline. The maintenance guy. Caleb Miller. Run a background check. I saw him last night at the aviary with a woman who looked like she charges $1,000 an hour for conversation. He's living above his means. Marcus's eyes lit up. He had been terrified that someone would eventually figure out that the breakthrough optimizations he'd been claiming credit for were actually things he stole from Caleb's late-night tinkering logs. I've had my suspicions, Marcus lied smoothly. I've seen him lingering near the server rooms. Maybe he's selling us out. Industrial espionage. That woman? Probably a handler for a competitor. That was all Elena needed. It confirmed her worldview. Everyone is a threat. Everyone lies. Everyone wants to take what is yours. She summoned Caleb to her office an hour later. She didn't ask him to sit. She let him stand there in his gray uniform, holding his toolbox. While she sat behind her massive glass desk flanked by Marcus and the HR director. "Explain yourself," she said. Her voice like liquid nitrogen. Caleb looked tired. His daughter Lily had a fever the night before, and he'd been up since 4 a.m. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vance? Is there a problem with the third-floor ventilation?" "I fixed the actuator. Don't play dumb with me," Elena snapped, throwing a file onto the desk. It was empty, just a prop, but Caleb didn't know that. "I saw you last night. The suit. The woman. The expensive dinner. You make $45,000 a year, Caleb. You're a janitor. So tell me, who are you selling our data to? Is it Cipher Corp? Is it the Japanese?" Caleb blinked, a slow, confused movement. I was having dinner. Is that a crime?" "It is when you're funding it with stolen intellectual property," Marcus chimed in, leaning against the wall with a smug grin. "We know what you're doing, Miller. We know you're leaking the system schematics." Caleb looked at Elena. He looked for a shred of humanity, a shred of the doubt that should come from 3 years of loyal service. He saw nothing but ice. And in that moment, something broke in him. Not his spirit, his patience. He thought about the patents he had developed in his spare time, the ones Marcus had clearly stolen. He thought about the nights he spent fixing their mess for free just because he took pride in his work. He thought about Lily and how he taught her to never let anyone bully her. "I'm not selling anything," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a low, steady rumble. "And that woman? She's not a spy. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because you don't see me. You never have. You see a uniform. You see a cost. You don't see the person who keeps this building from collapsing around your ears. Spare me the speech." Elena waved a hand dismissively. "I want access to your personal devices, and I'm putting you on administrative leave pending an investigation. And don't think about asking for that schedule change for your daughter's school recital. That's denied." That was the line. Bringing Lily into it, Caleb reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a flash drive or a weapon. He pulled out his badge. He placed it gently on the glass desk. It made a soft click. "You don't have to suspend me," Caleb said. "I quit. If you walk out that door," Elena threatened, standing up, "I will blackball you. You'll never work in this city again." Caleb turned at the door. He looked at Marcus, then at Elena. "Good luck with the servers, Ms. Vance. It's supposed to get hot tomorrow." And he left. He just walked out. No shouting, no scene. He just took his labor, his genius, and his dignity, and he left the building. Elena felt a surge of triumph. She had cut out the cancer. She had asserted control. "Good riddance," she told Marcus. "Hire a contractor to replace him. Cheaper anyway." But the universe has a funny way of balancing the books. 3 hours later, the temperature in the server room spiked. The automated cooling system, the one Caleb had manually patched with a custom script because the official software was buggy, failed. Without Caleb there to input the override code, the safety protocols engaged. Or they tried to. But Marcus, in his infinite wisdom, had removed the redundancies to save server space. At 2 p.m., the main database crashed. At 2:15 p.m., the logistics network went dark. At 2:30 p.m., Orion Tech wasn't a billion-dollar company. It was a building full of expensive paperweights. Elena was in the middle of a video call with the Japanese investors when the screens went black. "What is happening?" she screamed, storming out of her office. "The servers are melting down." A junior tech yelled, running past her with a fire extinguisher. "We can't get back in. The system is asking for a legacy override key." "Who has the key?" Elena turned to Marcus. "Fix it. You're the chief strategy officer." Marcus was sweating through his Italian shirt. I don't know the code." It was Miller. Miller handled the back-end patches. "Call him." Elena barked. They called. Straight to voicemail. They emailed. It bounced. Caleb Miller was gone, and he had taken the oxygen with him. By 6 p.m., the company stock had dropped 12%. The investors were pulling out. The board was calling for Elena's head. She was sitting in her dark office, the emergency lights bathing the room in an eerie red glow, realizing that the janitor she had sneered at held the keys to her entire kingdom. She had to find him. Not to fire him. To beg. She pulled his HR file, the one she had never bothered to read. She found an address. It wasn't in the bad part of town, but it wasn't the Gold Coast either. It was a walk-up in a working-class neighborhood. Elena drove herself. No driver, no security. She parked her Mercedes next to a rusted pickup truck and walked up the 3 flights of stairs, the smell of cooking onions and old carpet filling her nose. She hesitated at door 3B. She could hear voices inside. Laughter. She knocked. The door opened, and it wasn't Caleb. It was the woman. The shark from the restaurant. Veronica Sharp. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, holding a glass of wine. She looked at Elena disheveled, panicked Elena, and raised an eyebrow. "Well," Veronica said, her voice dry as dust. "If it isn't the Queen of Orion. We were wondering how long it would take for the castle to crumble." "I need to see Caleb," Elena said, trying to summon her CEO voice but failing. "It's an emergency." "Caleb is busy," Veronica said, leaning against the doorframe, blocking the view. "He's helping Lily with her math homework. Something he can do now that he doesn't have to worry about being subpoenaed for crimes he didn't commit." "Please," Elena whispered. It was the first time she had said that word in 20 years. "The company is dying." "I was wrong." Veronica studied her for a long moment, looking for the lie. Finally, she stepped back. "Come in. But if you insult him again, I will sue you for everything you own, down to your shoes." Elena walked into the apartment. It was small, cluttered, and undeniably warm. There were drawings on the fridge. There were toys on the rug. And at the kitchen table, sitting next to a little girl with pigtails, was Caleb. He looked up, and his eyes weren't angry. They were just sad. "I didn't steal anything, Elena," Caleb said softly. "I know," Elena said, her voice trembling. She looked at the papers spread out on the table. They weren't blueprints for a competitor. They were legal documents. Whistleblower forms. Patent filings. "Meet Veronica," Caleb said, gesturing to the woman. "She's not a spy. She's my lawyer. And she's also an internal auditor for the SEC. We've been building a case against Marcus Thorne for 6 months. He's been embezzling funds and stealing my patent design since I started." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. The villain wasn't the man in the coveralls. It was the man in the suit standing right next to her. The realization hit Elena like a physical blow to the chest. She sank into one of the mismatched kitchen chairs, the high-end fabric of her skirt brushing against a sticky spot of spilled juice. She looked from Caleb to Veronica, and then at the little girl, Lily, who was watching her with big, curious eyes. Lily didn't see a CEO. She just saw a lady who looked like she was about to cry. You were investigating Marcus? Elena stammered. While you were plunging toilets. I'm a systems engineer, Elena, Caleb said, his voice gentle but firm. I took the maintenance job because I needed the flexibility for Lily after her mom died. I couldn't handle the 60-hour weeks of a dev job. But I never stopped being an engineer. I fixed your systems at night because I couldn't stand to see bad code. Marcus caught on about a year ago. He found my logs. Instead of promoting me, he threatened to fire me and cut off my health insurance if I didn't keep optimizing the work so he could put his name on it. He blackmailed me. He said he'd make sure I never worked again, Caleb continued, glancing at his daughter. And with Lily's asthma, I couldn't risk the insurance. So I let him steal my work. Until last night, when Veronica told me we finally had enough evidence to nail him. Elena put her head in her hands. I trusted him. I let him poison me against you. I thought you were nobody. That's the problem, Ms. Vance, Veronica said, sipping her wine. You think power equals value. Caleb is the most valuable asset your company had, and you treated him like furniture. And now, your company is burning down because you fired the only guy who knew where the fire extinguishers were. Can you fix it? Elena looked up at Caleb, desperation raw in her voice. The servers. The override. Can you bring it back online? Caleb looked at Lily. Then he looked at Elena. Why should I? You fired me. You threatened me. Because hundreds of people work there, Elena said, tears finally spilling over. The receptionists. The junior devs. The other maintenance guys. If Orion goes under, they all lose their livelihoods. Not Marcus, he's probably got a golden parachute. But the real people. The people like you used to be. It was the first selfless thing Elena had said in a decade. Caleb sighed. He stood up and walked over to the fridge, grabbing a juice box for Lily. I won't do it for you, Elena. And I won't do it for the stock price. But I'll do it for the team. On 3 conditions. Name them, Elena said. 1. Marcus goes down, publicly. 2. You reinstate me, not as a janitor, but as the chief technology officer, with a contract that Veronica writes. And 3. You apologize. Not to me, to the entire staff. You admit you messed up. Done, Elena said. Let's go. The drive back to Orion Tech was like a scene from a heist movie. Veronica drove, Elena rode shotgun, and Caleb sat in the back with his laptop, typing furiously, prepping the code injections. When they got to the building, it was chaos. Emergency vehicles were outside. Employees were standing in the parking lot, confused and scared. They marched